So I'm trying to tell you really why we're reading the Aeneid, and we're only reading the first part of the first 4 books because we're only spending a week on it, not because it's not an important work of art in its own right, but we're not really treating it that way. All I want to get out of the Aeneid is an understanding of who Virgil is and what his views are, because in the Divine Comedy, Virgil shows up and leads Dante. And Dante says lines, one particularly important line from Virgil in the Divine Comedy, and you've got to know that, and it's in the reading. But so we'll see if you recognize it when you get there. And it's important to see the next step in the understanding of being after what we've had so far, which was physis and poesis, and now we're going to get another one, and it's an important step, the one in Virgil, the Roman understanding of being, on the way to the Christian understanding of being. So we've got a week on the Aeneid, and we won't be reading it with the thoroughness that we read Homer and Aeschylus and thinking about every line in the whole book. We just want to get the new understanding of being, get the geography of the underworld, because Dante just takes over everything that Virgil just makes up for the layout of the place where people go after they die. He's got a little help from Homer, but mostly Virgil just makes it up on his own, as far as I know. And finally, we want to read at the very end of the Aeneid the sort of deification of Augustus as another step on the way from polytheism to monotheism. I don't want to give you much historical background because that's not what I'm good at, and you can find it in any book, but I just give you the barest facts, and that is that Virgil was a Roman poet. He was a friend of Augustus Caesar. Caesar was the first emperor of Rome, and I don't know what's going to happen. Oh, I know. At least I recognize it. They're sawing some tree down outside. Should we close the door, or should we just put up with it? Let's see. Don't do it. Close the door yet. But if it gets persistent, we'll have to close the door. Okay. So Augustus Caesar becomes emperor in 27 B.C. He was born 400 years after Aeschylus, a long time, and died just before Jesus was born. He lived from 70 B.C. to 19 B.C. So Jesus was born roughly 19 years later. And the Christians thought of Virgil as somehow a kind of proto-Christian, that he was leading up to Christianity. And he is. And we'll talk about that more next time. But it's important to know that. Now, and you sort of know, as you read the story, that Aeneas is from Troy. He left when Troy was destroyed and in flames and everything. He left with his family, his son, his wife, and his father. And all these people have many, many different names. I would read them all to you, but it's just too many. But you've got a glossary at the end of the book. Whenever you come across a name you don't recognize, go look. It's probably another name for something. There's 6 names for Troy: Pergamus, Ilium, and a bunch of others. His son, Aeneas' son, is named Anchises, but he's also called Julius. And they're on their way to found Rome, which is also called Latium, Latin, Laurentine, Hesperia. I don't know where all this happens or how this all happens, so they all have so many names. And Juno is the patron of the city of Carthage, so she gets all involved in the Dido-Aeneas affair, and she's got utterly different names: Tyrian, Libyan, Punic, Phoenician. I don't know. Oh, that's Carthage. That's not Juno. But you can just look all those up. And Dido is the queen of Carthage, and at the beginning of a part where you don't read it, I think. Anyway, she's called Alyssa at least once. Why, I have no idea. Okay, so much for that. You just have to keep your eyes open. It's like reading a Russian novel. It's like reading Dostoevsky, where everybody's got 4 or 5 names. Only, I don't know, in Dostoevsky I have a sense of which ones are the familiar and which ones are the formal and which ones are the nicknames. But it doesn't matter here. Whatever name, as long as you can keep track of who's talking, that's all that matters. And the gods, a quick word about the gods, because you won't so easily find that in the end of the book. Of course, they've all got different names, but it's the same gods from the Greeks the Romans have taken over. And so Zeus has become Jove and Jupiter. Hera is now Juno. Aphrodite, and this is the one you'll recognize, is now Venus. Poseidon is Neptune. Hermes is Mercury. Ares is Mars. That all sound vaguely familiar to you, I should think, most of those. Athena is Minerva. And Apollo, in a way that is completely puzzling to me, is still Apollo. All of them have different names except Apollo. If anybody knows somewhere where it explains why Apollo keeps the same name, please come and tell me. It's just a strange puzzle to me why that should happen. And then there's another one you don't hear about much, Hebe, who is the sort of hostess and serves drinks on Olympus, is now Ganymede in the Roman. Okay, so that's just facts. And you could have found them out without me telling you, but I thought it was easier this way. So if you have any questions, I doubt it, because facts, unless I get them wrong, or unless you know more facts than I know, then I'll just stop with that and turn to what I think is interesting, and that's why the way I teach it is to pay attention to the understanding of being of these various epochs. That's the Heideggerian brilliant insight that gives you a whole new way of looking at the books. So here we go. The Roman understanding of being. You get a whole new world, whole new culture, the Roman Empire, and going with that, a whole new understanding of being. And I'm going to just give you a running start, because this is always strange to everybody. And remember, physis was the name for nature. We get the name physics from it. But, of course, it's very different in Homeric Greece than it is in physics. And it according to Heidegger, Heidegger's got his own reading of all these. He thinks that he can understand better than people have what the Greeks meant by these basic words, and the Romans too. And the people don't understand it because they, without realizing it, read our understanding of being back into all of them as if everybody had the same understanding of being. And Heidegger's interesting insight is they don't. So what was nature for them? What was physis for them? Well, Heidegger says you can translate it as bursting forth or welling up. Dick Rorty, a famous philosopher who died recently, says whooshing up. And that's given rise to a blog I noticed in Second Life called Whooshing Up. So Heidegger should be happy. What sort of thing whooshed up were the things that were very important to the Homeric Greeks, like passions that suddenly takes away Helen from her family, moods which come on to people, and like Achilles and his bad mood at the beginning of the Iliad. The gods whoosh up. All of a sudden, Telemachus looks up, and there is Athena. And storms at sea have this power. Nature in its sort of welling up and overwhelming, that's overwhelming. In its overwhelming side is in that notion. All of them, the moods, the gods, the sea and so forth, are not the sort of thing you can cultivate the way so we're not. That would be another understanding of being we'll get to. And you can't produce them. They are all out of control. They are literally overwhelming. And the only way, the response to them is awe and wonder. And it gives you a very open understanding of being. You get pulled into all this different sorts of worlds with different values, but they've all got in common this kind of welling up view of what being is. That's why you can go from world to world, which is what people do. And then in each world, you get some variation on this basic Homeric understanding. the worlds don't limit very much what can show up for you, what can shine for you, and so forth. And interestingly enough, the Iliad and the Odyssey themselves seem to have just welled up. We don't even know if there is a Homer, but obviously these books grew up in some way, came forth in some way in that time. Okay, that we've gone through. And we've gone through the next one. I should write them on the board, probably. So we've had Phusis. And that's the Homeric. And now we're getting Poesis. And that's the time of Aeschylus. And we ended in a hurry the Oresteia, and so I never said exactly. I'm standing in the way, obviously, of people who want to see what I wrote on the board. Okay, so let's just go back over the implicit understanding of being, which I made sort of clear, but I didn't ever really point at it. What's going on behind the scenes, so to speak, in the deep understanding of what it is to be that Aeschylus has, without even knowing he has it, because it's so much like the water to the fish, he's just in it. But what he sees is that if you nurture something and bring it out, let it express itself, it becomes something good and positive. But if you try to deny it or repress it or reject it, then it can be something dangerous. So what you want to do is let things come forth. Bring everything out at its best. It's an understanding that our job is cultivation, and things are around to be cultivated. You can see it, for instance, Heidegger talks about how the poesis way of understanding being, you could see it in a carpenter who was really dedicated to the craft of making carpentry things. He says the true cabinet maker makes himself answer and respond above all to the different kinds of wood that are slumbering within the wood, to wood as it enters into man's dwelling with the hidden richness of its nature. In other words, there's something in the wood that you can bring out if you're a good carpenter. You can bring it out but you have to choose different wood. Some wood you can bring out as a cabinet, some wood you could bring out, as a club, and some wood you could bring out as decorations and so forth. The important thing is that there seems to be in the wood, or for a sculptor, in the marble, something that you can finish and bring out. Some famous Greek sculptor said, it was Michelangelo who said that all his job is to bring the figures out that are in the marble. That's a poesis way of thinking of things. And it's a piece of wood, let's go back to that, has a definite grain. It has certain possibilities. Maybe it's good for making a violin or a wheel, to take other examples. And that bringing out, being responsive to and receptive to, and bringing out what's in people and in things is what Aeschylus sees as our job, people's job, and as what is important. And what I call, I think, is that this is an expressive order, not a repressive order. You get the best out of everything insofar as you nurture it and bring it out. And of course, the Furies are furious because the Homeric culture tried to impose some order on them, and instead of letting them, so to speak, do their thing. But Athena sees that what they need is to express their own best nature. And when they do that, of course, they become humanities. They become friendly ones. So, and people have, and what brings out the best in people, according to the Oresteia, is the love of Athens. That reconciles everybody, the Furies and the women and the men, all of them. So, and I would have read if I had time, and I can read it now if I didn't forget to bring it. I did, so I'm not going to read it now. Did I? No, there it is. Okay. In Thucydides' account of the Golden Age of Athens, in his book, The Peloponnesian War, he gives a long transcription of Pericles' famous funeral oration, in which he says just what I've been saying and what Aeschylus is saying. Pericles is a contemporary of Aeschylus, I'm pretty sure. And he says, you must realize, he's telling the Greek audience he's talking to, the people of Athens, you must yourselves realize the power of Athens and feed your eyes upon her day to day, till love of her fills your hearts. And then when all her greatness shall break upon you, you must reflect that it was by courage, sense of duty, sense of honor in action that men were enabled to win all of this. And so that it's they and see, I wanted to read one other thing. Where is it? Oh yeah, okay. And you can see in this pride in Athens this sense that everybody is brought out in their own way at their best. He says, but by what road did we reach our position? Under what form of government our greatness grew? Out of what national habits did it spring? These are subjects I will pursue. And then he goes on to talk about democracy. I mean, I think, pretty sure they invented democracy. We take it so much for granted. But the idea that you could have a country run by the people in the country who were voting on every issue as it came around was a just brilliant, it turns out, winning new idea. And that he's very proud of it. Our Constitution doesn't copy, this is Pericles again, the laws of neighboring states. We are a pattern for others to imitate. Its administration favors the many instead of the few. That's why we call it democracy. And then he says, the freedom which we enjoy in our democracy extends also to ordinary life. They are far from exercising a jealous surveillance over each other. We do not feel called upon to be angry with our neighbors for doing what he likes. Everybody sort of does what expresses best what they like. Or we don't indulge with injurious looks because they don't in any way hurt us. But all this ease in our private relations doesn't make us lawless as citizens. And that is, we obey the laws of Athens because they're, quote, worthy of admiration. So it goes on and on like that. And that's their understanding of being, but which puts the love of Athens first. And everything is brought out at its best. It can all serve Athens. Yeah, okay, that's enough for that. Now, the next one, a new one, the one I wonder if you can see it. It's so close to us, the Romans, that it's hard for us to see it. But it isn't quite like our understanding of being. But so you have to just see what it is. So it's really a question of imposing form on matter in the interest of production. I think the word for everything is a production, and everybody's job is to be productive. And I'll give you quotes in a minute that back up this. But notice that doesn't mean we bring out the intrinsicness in things by nourishing it. That would be poesis. What is it to impose or we're not, people aren't like craftsmen, responsive to what's in the material they're using. I think it helps to have an example of what the Romans were really good at and made a lot of, and doesn't have any intrinsic grain or structure at all, but is just a question of taking some amorphous stuff with no character at all and imposing a form on it. Can you picture what that would be? I mean, there are probably lots of answers to that question. Do you think we should close the door? Okay. It is getting worse. Thanks. Okay, what my idea to explain the understanding that goes with the production is that what you do when you produce something, from the Romans' point of view, is you take this stuff which has no structure and you impose something, a structure on it. Well, what would be a good example, I think, is bricks. I think the Romans probably were best at making bricks. And bricks, you just get this unstructured stuff and you shape it into a brick. And then you got something that you produced, and with that you produce roads and aqueducts and buildings and so forth, with no need to bring out with no way to bring out any structure that's there, because there isn't any structure there. And it isn't in it, and bricks certainly don't whoosh up. You just work at it. You just make them. And once you do, they're solid and lasting, like the Roman Empire. And just to show that that's sort of like us, but I think that we admire flexibility, just sort of jumping ahead to our understanding of being. I think we like the fact that we can change the form of anything at any time to fit what we want at that time. So better than bricks is probably plastic, which you can sort of reuse, the kind of plastic you could melt and make it into something else. Or probably the ultimate for us is the digital, where everything you digitalized, you can convert it from pictures into prints, into phone messages, and store it, and so forth. So, the Romans didn't get that far. They were just interested in producing something by putting this form on this stuff, which would be solid and stable and last a long time. Okay. Now, when we get to Virgil now, you'll see how that works and what kind of story that gives you about what the Romans and what Aeneid admire, and what Aeneas admires and what they're up to. So now we go to Virgil. You bear in mind the production story. I haven't tried to convince you yet that that's what Virgil and the Romans have. So we'll get back to it. So you got to see the difference between Virgil and Aeschylus, and it's not hard to see. Here is Aeschylus writing the the Oresteia, just because he's somehow possessed by it. You could feel that he's sort of out of control. He writes wild stuff, but he's kind of a channel for this deep understanding he has of what's going on that makes Athens special. Virgil is doing a job. He is literally hired by Augustus as a kind of public relations person, commissioned to write a poem that shows the Romans what they're up to and gives them a sense of where they're coming from, their past, and where they're heading, their future. That's his job. In return for that, he gets put up well and fed well and doesn't have to do anything else but work on this poem. So he goes to work and he produces the required product, the deliverable. I just realized that's the current jargon for it, I think. Then, as you read the book, you can see that it just feels different. Virgil doesn't seem to be inspired and wild and out of control. He seems to be just exactly, carefully, well, doing the job he's supposed to be doing and capturing the deep understanding of being, which he doesn't even know that he's got, but expressing it in a work of art so that everybody will be able to see what it is they all share and what it is they're all up to. So when Aeschylus says that, look what we've done, we tamed the Furies, we set up a legal system, we inspired patriotism in the citizens and so forth, you feel, I think, that Aeschylus is amazed at what he's talking about, and he's struggling to understand it, and he feels wonder at what he found. But I don't think that doesn't fit the feeling of Virgil, that he's already got it figured out, and he's not feeling wonder. What is he doing? Well, he's doing his duty. He's doing what he was paid to do as a citizen and as a Roman. And I don't think he feels wonder. I think he feels probably something like satisfaction that he did his duty and did the job he was hired to do. So Virgil wants to produce something that's really not there yet, to impose some kind of form on what it is to be a Roman and so forth. And he's not trying, like Aeschylus, to cultivate it, to bring it out, something that's latent that he can make explicit. And it's marvelous when he does. And it comes to full flower. That's the Aeschylus thing. In the Aeneid, you get Virgil. He produces something which is exactly what he was told to produce: a story about how the Romans got their way where they are, their past, and what their future is, which is displayed as a big pageant at the end of the book. And one would think that doesn't really make a very good work of art to do it in such a production way. But it doesn't seem to matter. It's a work of art. It really is a work of art working. Apparently the Romans treated it like a god. They learned it by heart, like the Greeks learned the Iliad and the Odyssey. They built shrines for it. They used it for divination. They really treated this book as a kind of sacred object. And that means they felt that Virgil had really done his job. He had shown them what they are up to, what's special about being Romans. And Aeneas is the certain sort of paradigm Roman, and so we will look and see what's special about Aeneas. So we're not quite ready for Aeneas yet. I just want to tell you more sort of how what Virgil admires comes across, not in anything he says. Because remember, I keep saying, he doesn't know that the understanding of being is production. He's involved in producing things, and he sees all these people producing bridges and roads and buildings out of their bricks and so forth. But here's the feel. You can see it in a metaphor. There are probably others, but this one struck me. I think I've read somewhere it's a very famous one. In the middle of page 16, in the line 610, just as the bees in early summer busy beneath the sunlight through the flowered meadows, when some lead on their full-grown young and others press out the flowing honey, pack the cells of sweet nectar, or gather in the burdens of those returning, some in columns drive the drones, a lazy herd out of the hives. The work is fervent, and the fragrant honey is sweet with time. Now, that's interesting. Ask yourself, what is it that he really likes about the bees? Why doesn't he write about the ants? The ants are equally or even more organized and got this system of all kinds of workers and the queen and so forth. It looks very similar. But he really especially admires the bees. What do the bees do that the ants don't do? I can't hear you. No, that's good, though. I think that's part of it. They drive the lazy people out and make them work. Yes. Yes. They produce honey. That's what you were going to say, too, about that. Okay. Well, yes, I think what he likes about the bees is they produce something with all that work. And it comes out just in the kind of choice of this kind of simile. He's using the style of like when such and such and such and such, which he gets from Homer, because he's often consciously imitating Homer. But I can't imagine a bee simile like that anywhere in Homer. It's just very Roman. Let's see now. Where am I? So there should be a kind of community in which everybody has a role, and they all work together, and out of that they produce some monumental finished product. That's what he admires, and that's what they do. And another way to see it is to look at the role of Zeus, now Jupiter. You'll find somehow when you ask sort of what do the gods do and what does the top god do, some indication of what they think people ought to be doing. So about Zeus, he says, on the middle of 9, O you who with eternal rule command and govern the events of gods and men and terrify them with the thunderbolt, and so forth. The main thing I want there is command and govern. The job of people is it's producing all right, but it's also commanding and governing. That's not the same as letting things whoosh up or nurturing them. It's something else. It's in a way, the idea is that it's people's job to control everything. And so none of this overwhelming that's out of control of either of the patriotic kind or of the Homeric kind. So I got to tell you more about it. It's not a expressive society. You get the importance of dominating, governing, imposing order. That's more like a repressive than an expressive order. But it's not quite repressive either, where you just sort of imprison and nail down and cover up what you don't like. It's that you govern the people and you bring them all under control. You don't nurture them, but you don't repress them either. It's a new idea. It's the Roman thing. It's government. And you can see it on page 6. We're keeping track of the gods. What happens with Neptune in line 200? This is Poseidon. This is the god of totally destructive, wild nature and storms and so forth in Greece. Not here. So start with line 207. He, that is Neptune, stills the sea. What? Stills the sea? He's always whipping up these storms. That's what the Homeric Greeks thought was special about Poseidon. Not at all that he stilled the sea. He glides over the water on light wheels, and now comes the important simile. And just as often, when a crowd of people is rocked by a rebellion and the rabble rage in their minds and firebrands and stones fly fast, if by chance they see a man remarkable for righteousness and service, they are silent and stand attentive, and he controls their passion by his words and cools their spirit so that all the clamor of the sea subsides. So there is this idea that people should dominate their emotions, not get too excited, and when somebody comes along who is able to calm them down and thereby get them to control their passions, that's perfect. That's what the leader, that's what a good person should be able to do. That's their job of imposing order and regulating things. That's what they think they're good at. And you get it again on 158. I don't think that's in your reading, but we'll read it anyway. Anchises is explaining to whom? I don't know. I guess he's explaining it to Aeneas. Yes, to Aeneas for sure. And he's what the Romans do well. And it's funny, they've got this kind of inferiority complex to all the amazing things that the Athenian Greeks did well. After all, they invented history. That was Thucydides, and mathematics. That was geometry and Pythagoras. And they already had a kind of natural science, various kinds. But atomism was their big thing. And I've lost track, but here you'll find, and they had all that. What do we Romans have? Well, it's Virgil's business to find out, because that's what he's being paid to do. And this is what he says at the bottom of 158. For other people will, I do not doubt, and that these other people are surely the Greeks, still cast their bronze to breathe with softer features or draw out of the marble living lines. They have great sculptors there. Plead causes better they've got better legal system. Trace the ways of heaven. They've got astronomy with wands and tell the rising constellations. That yours will be, now comes the Roman, yours will be the rulership of nations. Remember, Roman, these will be your arts, to teach the ways of peace to those you conquer, to spare defeated people, tame the proud. Another way to put it is taming. So instead of nurturing and bringing out things, you sort of shape them by getting rid of their wildness and the rough edges and getting them just to do calm, appropriate things. And that's their idea. Now, it might be, and somebody might have objected to me if I'd given them time, that sometimes you can't just tame them. They're just too far out of control. And then what do you have to do with them? Well, you have to repress them. But repressing them is only the last kind of activity of last resort. So here's about the repression. But I'm not sure where to read it yet. So it's about 410. Romulus and Remus shall make laws. That's the beginning of Rome. The gruesome gates of war with tightly welded iron plates shall be shut fast. Within, unholy rage shall sit on his ferocious weapons. Bound behind his back by 100 knots of brass, he shall groan horribly with bloody lips. Well, Ares is now a bad guy. Unholy rage is not a very complimentary description of the same thing that Homer admired when Ares shines on Achilles or yells in the battle, and then Achilles goes out and kills hundreds of people in an afternoon. But now, that's not what we want. Ares is not a god that they are worshiping. They are that kind of rage, that kind of aggression is just to be squished, put in prison, locked up. That's repression. That's what happened to the Furies before they got transformed by. They were repressed by the new gods, and that didn't work. Okay, another place where it's even clearer what you do if you can't tame them is on page 3, where they visit the King Aeolus, who's the guard of the winds, the middle of the page. In his enormous cave, King Aeolus restrains the wrestling winds, loud hurricanes. He tames and sways them. You see, the tames always comes in here. Them with his chains in prison. They rage in indignation at their cages. They're being repressed. The mountains answers with a mighty roar. Lord Aeolus sits in his high citadel. He holds his scepter. He soothes their souls and calms their madness. That's fine if he can do it. That's the first thing to try to do. That's to tame them. Were it not for this, then surely they would carry off the sea and so forth. But fearing what the all-able Father, but fearing that they would get out of control and whoosh around, fearing that the all-able Father, that's Aeolus, hid the winds within dark caves, heaping over them high mountains. That's pretty repressive. Heaping over them high mountains, and he assigned to them a king who should by Jove's sure edict understand just when to jail and when command to set free. Okay, so that's it. You either have to repress them and jail them, or you'll be able to set them free and tame them. That you just have to, if you're a Roman, you will know which to do, and you will do whatever makes for a very ordered, controlled and controlling culture. If you can't control them, then you have to imprison them. Let's see. So the moral is governing, dominating, taming is what people's relation to nature is. And being able to be tamed, though sometimes getting out of hand, but mostly being tameable, is what nature is. And so people aren't receptive anymore to what calls them, to the gods showing up, to the whatever it is that draws them in. People are now willful. They're not receptive, but active, and in charge of fixing and controlling everything. That's how much it sounds like us. I mean, we're sort of in the job, too, of controlling everything. The difference is really hard to pin down. And I'm not going to try to do it in this course. Heidegger tries to understand what's special about technology, which the Greeks and the Romans didn't have. But it's close to this. Anyway, all we care about, and I can't go off into to our understanding of being in this course. So we got them controlling everything. Now, another way. Anybody want to say anything? Now I said all sorts of perhaps interesting or controversial things. Anybody? Are you hearing me back there? I presume you. Oh, good. I can hear you. So I'm going on. Another way to try to see the understanding, the new way that they understand what it is to be a human being and what our relation to nature is, and is to see what the role of the gods is for them. I mentioned sort of in passing Jove and Aeolus, the god of the winds, but now to take the mainline gods and see what became of them is helpful. So it's not a question of people having some kind of practices for relating to the gods in the way Virgil describes it. It's as if the gods really were kind of symbols, not even cultural forces like in Aeschylus, but just ways of representing certain activities, I think that's the way to put it. So that means they're not just literary decorations, though they come close every once in a while. There's certainly some way that the people don't really believe in these Greek gods that they've taken over. For instance, you can get it in funny ways. On the bottom of page 8, he's being very Homeric, Virgil is, and he says what Homer says every once in a while: they flay the deer hide off the ribs, the flesh lies naked, sliced off, quivering, and so forth. They put them on spits, and they put them on the flames, and they eat, and with food their strength comes back again. You could have found that anywhere in Homer. And there's something missing. It just struck me today. Now I see, of course there's something missing. What would be one more thing that they would do before they ate that Virgil doesn't have? Exactly. They pour out libations to the gods. They are always trying to influence the gods, get on the good side of the gods, show their appreciation of the gods. These gods don't have any. They don't have, as far as I can see, any practices for how to relate to the gods. So the gods are almost like just literary flourishes. Yeah. Dido?
Yeah. When he meets Dido, they make a huge sacrifice to her, though. And then he talks like half the page about the altars he made. Or half the paragraph.
Half what?
He talks about like half the paragraph about the altars he made.
I see. And they make a sacrifice to the gods. Interesting. I don't know what to make of it. Does it tell you which god? What page are you on? Okay, and I may just have to take it back, what I just said. That's why people are supposed to be here. To sort of keep me honest and not having me hallucinate things into the book that are not there. And it would be nice if they were, because I think it'd be nice if, I don't think there's any place really in the Roman understanding of being to have gods of the sort. You got it?
Yeah.
Where is it? Where on the page?
The top of page 13.
Okay, let's see now. Okay, so Venus answering her son. Her son is Aeneas. So Venus answering her son began, and then she says all that. Before your altars many victims will fall at our hands as offerings to you. Sounds like Aeneas is talking. So Venus answering, with a comma. So Venus answering, her son began. Yes. Okay, now Aeneas is talking. Now I can read it and it makes sense to me. Okay, so now he's saying, O goddess, you must be Apollo's sister, or else are to be numbered with the nymphs. Whoever you may be, do help us, ease our trials, tell us what skies and so forth been cast. We wander ignorant of men and places and so forth. Before your altars many victims will fall at our hands as offerings to you. Interesting. I don't know what to make of it. I don't think it's obviously somehow not a common practice, like with every dinner. I made that point. But it is something that they will do. And if they want the goddess to do something for them, that's how it looks to me. So, and that's in Homer already. If you make sacrifices to the gods, you can get the gods to help you. That's the... I'm just thinking out loud, but before I do, go ahead. Yeah.
It just seems kind of like an Odyssean kind of thing. I know Aeneas for the first 20. I only read book one, but it sounds like he's like Odysseus so far. He's leading his men with Arcades and by his side, and then they find these goddesses. Like Odysseus finds goddesses. He finds Circe. He shows that he's a leader. He has traits that are shown as meritorious through the Odyssey. I don't know. It seems kind of like the Odyssey so far, but I get what you mean. How it's kind of different.
Well, the challenge you should keep in mind as you read it, because it might come in handy as a possible paper, is Virgil is copying everything he can copy from Homer, and he's going to have lots of things that look just like Homer. And the question is, do they have the same significance when Virgil does them? I mean, sometimes I think they do. I mean, in Homer, you can sort of bribe the gods. If you give them lots of the very best cuts of the meat you're eating, they will help you win. And Virgil's taking that over. But I can't help feeling that, I don't know how to put it yet very well, that's the worst way of relating to gods, is to sort of manipulate them and try to, I'll give you this if you'll give me that. That there ought to be a lot of awe and wonder and gratitude, for instance, when they're pouring out their libations, not just requests. I guess that's the way to put it. There's some kind of awe and gratitude in Homer, and all that Virgil sees in Homer is if you give the gods this, they'll give you that. That's a much less interesting form of the sacred. Yeah?
Well, just in relation to Homer, this is essentially the same thing that Odysseus does with the princess of the Phaeacians. When he encounters her, he says the exact same thing. You must be Artemis. In the same exact way that Aeneas did. And I read in a sense that this was in order so that he wouldn't threaten her by comparing her to a virgin goddess. He's saying he's not threatening her sexually as a man. And so it seems like they're doing the same thing, but then there's the opposite reaction from Venus. She says, I can hardly claim such an honor. She says the same thing that the princess does, but she's a goddess.
And it's a funny way to relate to goddesses, you think. Yes. The gods and the goddesses come in. I'll go following you, sometimes doing things which are just the opposite. It's as if Virgil doesn't understand or he doesn't care. I don't know which. Maybe you can figure it out. What these gods were. And for instance, we already saw one. Poseidon, which was the stirrer-up of the oceans into storms, becomes the god who quiets the oceans. But there's a wackier one, which I'll go right to because it's interesting how somehow he doesn't get it with respect to what's interesting about the gods. Let's see if I can find it. It's also based on Homer. That's why I want to look at it. Okay, here. Venus, Aphrodite, now plays a funny role that's based on something in the Iliad. In the Iliad, when the beginning of the Iliad, Achilles has a fight with Agamemnon over whose sort of prize some particular girl is. And Achilles gets so upset because Agamemnon's taken this nice girl away from him. And he's just about to draw his sword and kill Agamemnon, which would not be a very cool thing to do since Agamemnon is in charge of the whole army. And at that point, Athena jumps in and grabs him by his ponytail, his long hair, and pulls him back and says, "What, are you crazy? This is, in effect, not the sort of way to respond to this situation. And cool it." And he does. Now, something similar happens here, but see if you can notice a weird difference. Okay, and I don't know why Virgil is doing this. Maybe somebody will tell me. At the bottom of 47, it's transferred now. I mean, obviously, Aeneas isn't going to be having a fight with Agamemnon, but it's interesting where it's transferred, and because we want a case where somebody's doing something where they're losing control, and some god comes in and tells them that they're not relating properly to the situation. And here's what happens at the bottom of 47. "And carried off by my mad mind." And what happened? Guess what? He just came across Helen up on line 765. And I see the daughter a little earlier, clinging to the so-and-so, crouching silently, and so forth. She in terror of the Trojans, and so forth. She crouched, I'm now the middle of the page, a hated thing beside the altar. And who is that? That's Helen. He found in the chaos at the destruction of Troy, he's found Helen hiding in terror at the altar, and he's so upset that he says, and carried off, now I'm at the bottom, by my mad mind, I was still blurting out these words, some terrible thing, some bad thing about her, I don't know. When, with such brightness as I have never seen, my gracious mother stood there before me, and across the night she gleamed with pure light, unmistaken goddess, as lovely and as tall as she appears whenever she's seen by heavenly beings. Who's showing up to stop him from killing Helen? It's Aphrodite. It's Venus shows up, not Athena. I mean, you can see why Athena would tell Achilles to cool it, that she's not responding to the situation, because Athena's the one who's best at responding to whatever situation. Why she shows up, I don't know. But she says, at the top of 48, "My son, what bitterness has kindled this frantic anger? Why this madness? What of all you care for me, where has it gone? Should you not first seek out your father, worn with years, Anchises, where you left him? See if your wife, Chryseia, and the boy Anchises are still alive." Says, don't get upset at Helen. You've got your domestic situation to worry about. You better go home and worry about your wife and son. Isn't that an ironic thing for Aphrodite to be saying? Isn't it exactly what did Aphrodite do when Helen had a new child? And she was wild passion, Aphrodite, in the Greek thing. She encouraged Helen to run off from her husband and child. But now Aphrodite's been switched around to Venus, and Venus is protecting the family. She's a kind of goddess of domesticness. And that's all. It's just strange indeed that he would give Venus. It's as if these names don't really even name the same gods, but they do. They've just got new functions. He would give Venus not the function wild erotic passion, but the function domestic preservation of calmness and tameness in the family. And say to Aeneas, don't get so upset. Go home and take care of your family. That's what I want to. That's related to what you were saying, in the sense that the gods are given these weird jobs. So I want to see now if. Somewhere I have written down that he describes her as the common fury of Troy and her homeland. Do you see that? Maybe I got it from another translation, but I don't think so. I don't see it. Well, I don't need it for what I want to say. I was going to explain why he would call her a fury, but it's obviously just because. Line 771. Let me find it. Way back there. Ah, yeah, okay. Yes, I see. There she is she, the common fury of Troy and of her homeland, she had hid herself, a Haiti thing. I just wanted you not to think that that has anything to do with the Furies. It just means, even with the capital F, it just means that she was very upset. And everybody was furious at her, is what it really is, all it's supposed to say. Yeah.
What does it mean in the Aeneid? It was almost completely removed from Aeschylus, from Homer, but they keep talking about fate.
Yeah.
The gods even talk about fate. It's not so much like the gods' decision anymore as it just is something that exists. Like, it's something that's known that the Trojans, like Aeneas, that they are going to be the ones who establish Rome. And then if a god tries to mess with that fate, then he's just going to get, I don't know, he's going to fail in his attempt.
Who's going to fail in whose attempt?
Like Aeolus, when he has the winds which ravage Aeneas' fleet. Neptune knows that, so Poseidon knows that it's fated that Aeneas will succeed in founding the Roman Empire. But why is there now like this introduction of fate and destiny that
I see that. Good question. I wish I had a good answer. Maybe somebody will come to office hours and help. It's true to begin with that fate is really what's going on. It's Aeneas's fate is to found Rome. It's going to happen. It isn't as if the gods exactly cause it to happen. It's just that they sort of make sure that Aeneas will do it. I mean, that's where the Dido story comes in. Aeneas has to leave Dido, and that means a big deal, as we'll see next time, because it's his fate to found the Roman Empire. Good, help with this.
Maybe just kind of differences in interpretation. Like in the Odyssey, things just sort of spurred up or happening. There isn't necessarily a guiding force behind them, but here in the Aeneid, there's sort of a control of things. Fate ensures that things are going to be controlled in a certain way, and it's almost like existence itself is tamed or controlled in a way. Because while things may happen in between, inevitably this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I like you made a step forward. Yeah, fate is sort of the way, I don't know how to say it. Everything is controlled, as you say. There's no controller. It's not really Zeus that establishes the fate, I don't think. But the whole universe is set up so that Rome will get founded by Aeneas. And it's certainly got to do with control, all right, but it's not a personal kind of control. Remember, in Homer, the gods get together and discuss and give moral reasons and not so moral reasons, why it's a good thing to get Odysseus off the island and let him go home or something, and they have to convince Zeus of it. And it seems all sort of open and free. I mean, it isn't as if Odysseus is free. He's sort of stuck on the island until they convince Circe to let him go. Is it Circe? No, Calypso to let him go. But it's all open. I mean, the gods could have decided otherwise. Nobody says it's important. No, well, let me just think about it. Nobody says when they're having this discussion on Mount Olympus, well, he's destined to get home, so you might as well clear the stuff out of the way so that he can get home. They're still deciding. It's an open, free world. The people aren't free because there are all kinds of factual things that get in the way, like gods or like nymphs like Calypso and so forth. But in general, it's up for decision. Whereas this fate story is very deterministic, it seems. Nobody discusses whether Aeneas should or shouldn't, could or couldn't found Rome. That's just been settled somehow. Yeah?
Well, and just literally, I think when they talk about fate, they're talking about the prediction of the actual fates, the goddesses themselves, so you can do good, bad.
That's right. There are gods called fates, and they predict it, but when they predict it, then I don't know, do they do more than predict it? Do they make it happen, or they just...
No, I think they're just a vehicle.
Yeah, they just sort of tell you what is going to be made to happen. Now, who's making it happen, and sort of why. For the main test is, why isn't Aeneas allowed, or at least open to being able to stay with Dido? They're such a nice couple, but he can't because his fate is to found Rome. Now, I don't know what that means exactly. If anybody does, let me know. I guess I'm just trying to grope. It gives the gods less of a job. Because if the gods' only job is a bunch of 3 old ladies or something are the fate people, and their only job is to sort of recognize what's going to happen anyway, then the gods, if you believe it is a kind of mythical story, don't have anything to discuss or anything to decide. That's on one level in Homer, and where they do have the things to discuss and decide. And there's no place for the gods helping something happen or preventing something happening. The way Athena gets on the side of Odysseus and helps him shoot the suitors. There's plenty of and shows this bright light on Achilles and Aeneas. Too many people on Odysseus and Telemachus, which helps them get all of the armor out of the room where they're going to fight the suitors and so forth. The gods play a big sort of free role, and it's not just sort of manipulating people, it's sort of the way people react when they're in tune with each other in the situation. And that's a lot different than fate, where they just react that way, but not because of whether they're in tune with the situation, but because that's just what has to happen. And so the gods have a real role. Attuning has a real role. People getting in sync with each other in the situation has a real role. And nobody ever says it's just fated. I think, I wish I could put that all together better, but those are the pieces, all right. Yeah.
The way I thought of it, it shifted as Aeschylus shifted when they had the judgment of Orestes, and then the people decided that Orestes' fate. I think it's a shift to even a more humanistic approach and a more nationalistic approach. Because when you say that Rome is now fated to be brought into existence by the gods, but you don't really show that there's any contention, you take the power away from the gods and you put it squarely in the myth of the creation of Rome, squarely in the myth of Rome, the Roman people. It kind of gives this power to Romans that just wasn't existent in Homer's time.
I think that's right what you're saying. The way our whole conversation started is sort of what the gods aren't in Virgil that they were in Homer, and this fate taking being the ultimate explanation is the big difference between that and Aeschylus saying Zeus is behind everything. Zeus isn't behind everything in Aeschylus because Zeus has already sort of figured out the whole plan and you just have to execute it. He's behind everything because there are all kinds of the different ways of reacting. The vengeance people have Zeus behind them, and the law and order people have Zeus behind them, and that doesn't. And Zeus hasn't generally got a finished plan. He's open to discussion. So fate takes all that God dimension out of things and puts in it a dimension which is just, so much like us. And you might as well say, well, all the atoms are going to go on moving the way they are, and you could predict, if you knew how they were all going to happen, that Aeneas was going to found Rome. It's got that kind of flavor. Okay, I think we should go on, but I think you started an interesting issue, and keep your eye open for what we can say about fate. Okay, now let me go back, though, while I find my way back, because I jumped. Okay, the way that the gods have new jobs. So now I'm going to go back to where I was. So you're going to see Virgil, how he deals with the gods. It's going to be, again, reflect his understanding of being without him knowing it. It's going to be in the similes, but it's also going to be in his understanding of the gods. So let's look at his understanding of Jupiter. He's certainly not a god that protects strangers or a god for moving between worlds. He's the king and the father. But again, what is a king and a father? Well, it's somebody who sort of governs and tames the children or the citizens or whatever. I mean, the citizens isn't the word for what kings, the subjects, and so forth. But it's no expressive order in it at all. Zeus is just sort of given the job of commanding and governing. Though now we're back to the fate thing again. How can he even have the job of commanding and governing? But if he had a job, all I can say is if he had a job in Virgil, it would be commanding and governing, controlling what gets out of control. I said look at page 9. Let's look at page 9. Well, I read that already. You who with eternal rule command and govern the events of gods and men. Okay, that's odd, because it looks like Zeus has got some job, and yet it's the fates that seem to be commanding everybody. I don't know what to think about that. I just think it's as I said, something like, well, if Zeus did have anything to do, it would be commanding and controlling, and Virgil's sensitive to that because he's sensitive to the understanding of being. But in fact, he's got fate in there that trumps it all. And one of the things that Zeus does is calm the storms. That's another funny example. Keep your eyes open for them, where it looks like the gods have flipped over to the exact opposite of what they were. I mean, Zeus is a god of thunderbolts and so forth, and now he's never, as far as I know, does Zeus go around calming storms in Homer. It's just not the way it works. Let me see if on 10 is where I talk about it. Yes, at the top of 10, 355. But then he smiled upon her. Jupiter, father of men and gods, smiled upon whoever. Just as he calms the heavens and the storms. He's smiling at Venus. But anyway, that's a funny job for Zeus. And that's all I can say about it. But notice that Zeus, you get the kind of god, the top god, is going to express the understanding of being. So Zeus has got two jobs, going between worlds, but insofar as he does storms, he does whooshing up and throwing his thunderbolt. So that's not the main thing he does, but it's the second thing he does. And now, since ordering everything is what's important, so Zeus's job is controlling, calming, taming, doing all the kind of things that emperors and fathers do, only written large into the job of Zeus. Okay, so then there's Neptune calms the sea, which is odd. There's Venus, who's got this job of telling Aeneas to go home to his wife and kids, and so forth. Now, let's see. It's just, so why do I want to say? Oh, yeah, I was just going back now to Aeneas and Aphrodite. So there's Aeneas, not the sort of guy who would kill an unarmed woman, but he's so upset about Helen, who's caused this whole disaster, that he's about to kill Helen. And then Venus shows up and calms him and says, go home. Okay, now I got as far as I'm going to get on that one. Over here. Okay, I got just a few more minutes, but so I'll say things, some things for that are still about gods. I happen to be, doesn't bother you, finished with what I wrote out for the lecture. But I've already written out what's for Thursday, and I'm going to talk about Thursday. But now I want to go back. I was going to review but next time, but instead of that, I'll just talk about it now. So the new Roman versions of the Greek gods don't do anything ontological anymore. They aren't the attuning ones. They aren't how people relate to their situations. They don't do anything that couldn't be done by fathers and rulers of various sorts. And they they don't do anything that people don't do by their own willpower. See, just to be attuned, you have to, like to go to sleep, you need some god to help you because you can't do it by your own willpower. In Virgil, the bottom line is either fate, which you just have to do it because that's how it's going to be, or you've got the strength to do it by your own willpower. These are in conflict. Because keep your eye open for next time. Could Aeneas have stayed with Dido? Did he have the willpower to do it? Did he have the character to do it? Was there any space left in his job description to do it? Those are questions. But whatever it is, there doesn't seem to be a particular job for the Greek gods. Now what I'm going to say is something new for the next 5 minutes. Something I don't understand. But it's clearly important. And so, again, if anybody finds out anything, I think I looked on Wikipedia and it didn't help much. There is one kind of God that's important. And it's not a god in Homer at all. There is the household gods. So you get the Aeneas from the very beginning. Pious Aeneas is the one who takes care of the household gods. He introduces himself that way. He says, where does he say it? Let's try 14. Yes, the middle of 14. I am pious Aeneas, and I carry in my ships my household gods together with me. So what are these household gods? Well, they are little statues, apparently, and they represent the ancestors, the family tradition. To be pious is to sort of accept the family tradition and preserve the family tradition, and there you have these figures who, I don't know, I'd like to know, do they look like Grandma and Grandpa, or are they just little old figures, figures of what? Does anybody know? I got no picture of them. They look very much sort of lumpish when the little bits of pictures I've seen of them. But they're obviously so important. Aeneas, it's important to know that when Aeneas leaves Troy, there are 3 people who are important to him. He carries his father on his back. That's the tradition. That points the same direction as the household gods. He's going to be true to the family tradition. He's got 2 hands. What has he got in each hand? Who else has he got? Well, his son, the future. He's got the past on his back in his father. He's always got Anchises by, is it Anchises? Yeah, I think so. Or is that his father? What's his son's full name? What? I've got it written down here, but I don't want to take time to find it. And what? Iulius is one of his names, right, but not his usual name. Anyway, he's got his son by the other hand, one hand, and his wife by the other. And I'm going to talk about this more next time. It's interesting and not just accidental that he's always got his father on his back. I mean, that's one of his jobs as a dutiful son. And he's always got the other hand on the future in his son, who's going to be found the Rome. But there isn't any particular place for his wife. She would be the present if you look for the past, present, and future. And the funny thing is that Aeneas hasn't got any present. We're going to talk about that more next time. He's either always taking up the past and preserving the tradition, that's pious Aeneas, or he's fated to found Rome, that's the other aspect of Aeneas. And look at therefore, what will happen to his wife? You haven't read far enough, probably. Keep your eyes open. What happens to his wife? Now let's see if I've got as far as I want to get. Okay, that's it. Read book 4 for next time. So, okay. Now, we're going to just go back quickly in a review of what I said in a hurry at the end last time. I'll say it in a hurry now, too, but I'm adding something that I wasn't clear about last time. So, there are these gods. There are two kinds of gods in the Aeneid. There's the renamed Greek gods, who are the familiar ones to you. And then there are these new gods, the household gods. And I have to say a word about each. What I want to say about the renamed Greek gods is that they really don't have any function. This will help you both understand Homer and Aeschylus in retrospect and why the gods are not interesting, really, in the Aeneid. There's nothing the gods do that people couldn't do on their own with just by being fathers or kings or lovers or whatever. And you don't really need Zeus. You've already got a father, and you maybe are a father, and so forth. What I want to say is the gods, the renamed Greek gods, don't have any ontological function. They don't do things for people that people can't do for themselves. Like what? Well, for instance, by changing worlds, helping people adapt to changing worlds. It takes Athena to pull that off, to make Telemachus grow up in an hour in the afternoon. A more simple one is that the gods are always going around showering sleep on people. People can't put themselves asleep by their own willpower. There are things that you could do when you're receptive that you can't do just actively. And the most important one, I think, is probably the gods are the attuning ones. That is, they're in charge of moods. Remember, Helen's mood of seeing everything erotic and running off with Paris is brought about by Aphrodite. Why not just do it on your own? Let's say today we're going to be in an erotic mood, then that's that. Now I've done it, I'm in that mood. That's just not how it works. The moods come over you. You can't get control of them. You can't get into them on your own, and you can't get out of them on your own. Those are all roughly ontological functions in this sense, that they do something for people that people can't do for themselves. Yeah, good.
On page 25, we talk Venus plus Ascanius.
Wait. On page 25, yeah? 965, got it. Okay, but Venus pours upon Ascanius a gentle rest. Look at that. She takes him to her breast, and so and so and so and so. Well, all I can say is that it won't, I'm afraid it won't be very convincing or dramatic, is Virgil just copies things from Homer, I think, sometimes without really understanding things. And he's saying, so here comes, for one thing, it's Aphrodite who puts Ascanius to sleep. That's already peculiar. That's not Aphrodite's job to put people to sleep. I don't think she does in Homer. She wakes them up into these passions. If you find a place, which he did, and I think that's a good thing to pay attention, where a god, one of these taken over from Homer gods, do something that can't be done by people but on their own, then you have to really ask yourself, is that compatible with a picture of the gods that Aeneas has, that Virgil has, or is that some accidental little something that he dragged in? Because of course he knows Homer. I mean, it's permeated by a knowledge of Homer. So all I can say is, whoops, I can't make the generalization I wanted to make, but it's still, I would say, largely, very largely true that the gods don't have this kind of special role anymore. There's just moods just come and go. There's no way, there's nothing that explains them or stands behind them or something. And there was one other I came across. Let me see how it fits in here. Well, Jupiter governs everything, but governing is something that governors can do. What's interesting in Aeschylus is that Zeus is behind everything. Remember, I said it's like a background, that everything that happens makes sense under the general understanding of being, really. And Aeschylus gives that job to Zeus. Again, that's something you can't do, bring about the understanding of being in your culture, the way the understanding of being governs what you do. The way the understanding of being governs what you do is that it determines what it makes sense to do. And that's the background practices, I sometimes call it. And Aeschylus has this glimmer. He doesn't know what to say, but he thinks that Zeus is somehow behind everything. And that's very different. That's ontological. And it's something people don't understand and can't control. It's something what makes sense to people makes sense to them, and in one culture, which doesn't make any sense in another culture, just comes into my mind. Suicide, for instance, is very different. You can't blame Dido for committing suicide. The Stoics thought committing suicide when the situation was hopeless was a very rational and brave thing to do. It's not clear whether she does it rational. I think Virgil thinks that she's out of her mind, but it could have been all right to commit suicide. And another one which I didn't mention, which came up in office hours every once in a while, you must have noticed, nobody objects to the fact that Agamemnon brought a woman home with him. His mistress is a French concept. I don't know, you need a Greek concept for it. His prize of battle, it gets translated. That's Cassandra. And nobody says, Clytemnestra is very angry at Agamemnon for killing Iphigenia, but she isn't in the least concerned or upset, as far as I remember, about the fact that he's come home with Cassandra, because that's just what you do. Different things, you do different things in different cultures, and what's behind all that, whatever you do, is the customs of the culture, and they control things. That's ontological, and just to say that Zeus governs things is turning this ontological something into a job that any governor can do. Is that? I wasn't going to say all that, what I just said, but I'm glad I did. I hope it has. You are not looking too bewildered, which is a good thing. Okay, I'm going to go on unless somebody wants to call me again. Yes?
Well, I'm wondering what the difference is between what Aphrodite does with Helen and what Venus does with Dido.
Aha, good. I think, that's a neat one. That's a good paper topic. It's got to do with the difference between bringing about something by way of a mood, which is a sort of background on the basis of which certain behavior becomes just exactly what you're drawn to do. That's what Aphrodite does. It's what Venus does is very manipulative. It's not sort of ontological. She gets Cupid to shoot her with an arrow. She gets imitates the kid and so forth. And I think that's the difference. I mean, this kind of manipulative thing is something people could do, and it is in the foreground. And there's something about the way Aphrodite sort of shines on the situation between Helen and Paris, which is a different level of control. In both cases, governing is, in both cases, somebody's getting somebody else to do something without them sort of against their will. But it's done differently. I think that's a great question. We'll use it as a paper topic some other time. But it does help make, and I may not have done it very well. In fact, it might still be a paper topic, because it's an interesting, subtle point where you'd have to look in detail you don't have much detail, unfortunately, about what Aphrodite did that made Helen run off. But it's, I'm being sort of Heideggerian when I say Aphrodite shined on them. Although you do have the place where Athena shines on Telemachus and Odysseus and gets them in sync with the situation with each other when they're hiding the weapons. So there's a sense in which the gods shine on people. That's a global thing. That's like a mood. That sets up a situation. It isn't as if Venus shines on anybody. She just pulls a lot of manipulative maneuvers. So I think that's very interesting. Anybody else? Yeah.
Maybe it's kind of the difference, too, of just affecting the whole way that you see a world and affecting the way that you make decisions versus a very specific instance of making Dido fall in love with Aeneid.
Yes, I think it.
Dido hasn't, automatically turned into this, like this erotic mood that, like, pervades everything. It's specifically directed towards something. So it's like a single happening occurrence instead of, like, an overall switch in the way everything is perceived.
I think that's good. I think that with the way I'm trying to read Homer, as I say, you have to read a lot into it. But the domestic situation that Hera should have been in charge of, we never hear much about that. But the domestic situation just gets switched, the whole situation, to an erotic situation. And inside of that, it makes sense for her to run away with Paris. But that's not what the Venus or Aphrodite operates on. She operates on the whole situation. She switches one world, domestic, into another world, erotic. I take it that's what you just said. Is that right? Okay, I think that's right. Now, I'm going back to this, because I don't know whether, maybe we'll have more time at the end, and don't hesitate to talk, because I'll get covered what has to get covered somehow. But I'm ready, we've got to go on. So, now the household gods. I was given a kind of brief lesson on household gods after the lecture, and it turns out they're sort of little statues about that high, as I understood it, and they don't look like the grandparents. They are, I don't know what they look like. No, they're just sort of generic looking. But each family has them, and they represent somehow the values of the family, the tradition of the family, the identity of the family. It's still pretty hard to understand. I could certainly do a lot better with the Homeric gods. I don't know what that is, but what I do understand, when I was told it, we have this question. Aeneas is running around carrying the household gods. That's what we want. I can at least sort of half understand that. He says, the very first paragraph on page 1 in here, lines 1, I sing of arms and the man, that's Virgil talking, and skipping down, then he brought a city into being and carried his gods to Latium. That is, he brought the household gods of the family of Priam, who was the ruler of Troy. He brought them to the new little city, which was going to grow up to be Rome. And why is he doing that? Well, because they are his family's identity and tradition, and because his family is the ruling family, he can carry around somehow like the legitimacy of founding a new Troy, in effect, which is Rome. But because he's got the household gods of Troy, he has the right to found a new Troy. It's not like the gods at all in Homer or Aeschylus, and it's not something if somebody could tell me in office hours or right now, something that we do that's like this, like suppose you had the family photo album, and I just made this up, and there you sort of see all the important people in the family. And if you got the family photo album, it somehow shows that you have the right to do stuff in the name of the family. Maybe it's like that. I'm groping. I just would love to see something in our practices that gives me a clue as to what's going on. Yeah?
Well, not quite our practices, but in one of my other classes, we were doing a little bit of stuff in Near Eastern history. And I know that in cities like Babylon, they have city gods, which actually had statues representing them. If the god were ever taken away in battle, then that represents an insult to the city.
Ooh, it's like football games and stealing the pelicans and so forth. Now I'm beginning to see some reason, something.
No, but I mean, they would say that the gods are protecting them. Like I noticed on page 19, about line 744, when Aeneid came, I believe, he said,
What line? 744.
around 744.
Okay,
"You're
I
not
got it.
come to devastate your homes and with the sword to loot the household gods of Lydia." Like if he's thinking about looting them, I could see that aspect to it.
That's running off with the pelican. Yes. I mean, it's a trivial example, but it's the same thing. I mean, there's a symbol of Berkeley, and every once in a while, the one. I mean, isn't that the one thing that people run off with every once in a while? That bird that's behind the building over by Barrows. I think so, isn't it? Or is there something else? There's something else that they run off from Stanford, which is the symbol, the axe. It's exactly like that. There's something which is the symbol of the place, and if you can preserve it, then you're sort of maintaining the place and your right to the place. And if it gets taken away, it's somehow a bad insult. So it's like stealing the Berkeley or Stanford to steal the axe. Yeah, we've got that funny thing. I mean, it's trivial for us. It was obviously, now if you could imagine that, not as a part of sort of sports and games and so forth, but something that somehow people took seriously, then you'd have it. Yeah.
I don't know. To me, it seems more like a legitimacy or qualification kind of thing, almost like when a new ruler would take the throne, like family heritage or like a bloodline would be necessary in order for that person to be like a legitimate ruler. And rulers that were, a lot of rulers were always afraid of being, overthrown if they didn't have sort of that type of legitimacy, or they had, taken the throne for some reason. It's almost like that he's taking like Troy's history with him, so he's like the legitimate heir to creating a new city.
Yes, right. That's what I tried in my simple-minded way to do with the family photo album. Yes, that's the history of the family, and he's taking it with him, and it shows that it's really him, and it's really his family, and wherever he goes with it, he can sort of plant it, and it'll be a branch of that family and that tradition. Yeah. Okay, that's the best I can do with that. Anybody who knows more or has some more sense of what we have, which we might have, right, or staring us in the face like the axe, and which more of what sense we have, that we could make sense of it. Tell me about it. Now, let's see, where are we? Notice how different this is than the ontological gods. I mean, this is some other job that these gods are doing, namely giving them their identity, sort of holding up for them their identity and their tradition. But these sort of lumpy statues, how they do that, I have no idea. And now, okay, new point. And this is where I got to last time. We've been reviewing. And there's a new virtue. Yeah?
I just thought of kind of a better example. Like maybe like a family ring that gets passed down from like the husbands and the wives of each family. So like when their kid gets married, then they give the family ring to them. It's like passing on.
That's good. That reminds me of the tradition. Now we don't have it anymore of the sort of gold watch that the father gives the son and the son gives his son and so forth. Yes, there are these things that somehow symbolize the tradition that's handed down. Okay. Yeah.
I think probably the closest parallel you could draw to household gods in modern life is a lot of Catholic families have like a crucifix that they pass down through generations that kind of they put up on the wall, and it sort of protects the house and brings the spirit of God into it in a way. I think that probably is the closest thing that you could draw a parallel to.
That's good. The crucial thing is I didn't even realize it. I thought you just, if you moved, you've got a new crucifix and you didn't carry this one around. But if you have one that is yours and belongs with your house, then it's exactly, and you ignore for the moment that it's also Jesus and so forth. But just as a thing which is sacred and carries your tradition, yes, that's interesting. Protestants don't have that, do they? I think that's interesting too. Yes?
In China, they have a lot of family shrines where you worship your ancestors.
That's right. That seems a different thing, but it's because, well, it's in the house is the shrine, so you could take it with you if you move. Would you take it with you if you moved?
I would say if you move, you would take the ornaments with you instead of the new shrine where your new house is, right?
I couldn't hear you.
You would take the shrine with you. I mean, this
There'd be a hole in the house. Is that what you're? If you took it, or they would take it. It's a shrine isn't the kind of thing you can sort of carry around.
It's not a big physical shrine. Like you have a bureau almost, and then on top of the bureau you have your little red box with the picture, and you have it inside.
And in that box, so you could take that with you, and would take it with you.
Yeah.
Okay, so in lots of different cultures, there's something like the household gods, something that stands for the family and its tradition. Yeah.
These household gods also establish kind of ownership to the new place.
Yes, well, once you come and sort of plant the household gods over there in Italy, that just it makes Rome a descendant of Troy. That's very important. That's why we keep hearing about why Aeneas is bothering to carry around these clay statues. It makes a big difference for Virgil. Okay, now I'm going on. That's fascinating, though. We've made progress. Okay, now, a new emotion. Where last time we had patriotism as what united all the people in Athens, what they all admired, and they admired Athens, fill yourself with the love of Athens, Pericles says. And now, what's the new emotion that comes with the Romans? It stares you in the face, but you have to say it. What is it? What's the phrase that goes with Aeneas? Blank Aeneas says. Pious. Piety is the new emotion. Piety seems to mean respect for the tradition, but also, and much more important, I think, it means doing your duty putting your duty above all else. And that's the new emotion. Aeneas is going to have to always sacrifice everything that he might otherwise care about for his duty, and that's why he's called constantly Pious Aeneas. On page 14, for instance, and I realize I haven't done the page numbers as I should. On 535 of Book 1, he announces himself when he arrives, I am Pious Aeneas, and I carry in my ships my household gods together with me, rescued, and so forth. So they go very much together. That to be pious is to respect the tradition, and that's the God's part, and to do your duty. That's the part that's going to become crucial in the sad affair with Dido. Now, I guess I also said this. I'm still reviewing, but I'm trying to add new things, and I get things wrong. So I said that what's really crucial to a pious person is preserving the past and doing whatever you need to bring about the future destiny of what you're up to. In this case, found Rome. And then comes the fact that Aeneas has his father on his back, literally. That's the tradition. And he's carrying him around all the time like that. And that's on page 51. On 955. He says to his father, I'll bear you on my shoulders. That's not too much for me. Whatever awaits us, we both shall share one danger and one salvation. Let young Julius come with me, and let my wife Chryseia follow at a distance. I said that she was on his other hand. That's wrong. Somebody came up after class. On his back is his father. In his hand is his son. And Chryseia is followed, I don't know why, at a distance. There's no place in this story for his wife. And they soon just lose her. And nobody notices that they lost her. And I take this to mean another way of saying that what's crucial to Pious Aeneas is his tradition, that's his father on his back, and his future founding of Rome and the dynasty of the emperors, that's Julius on his hand, and there's no place in there for somehow enjoying the present. There's not, when you're pious and do your duty, there's no place for the present, I think. And certainly with Aeneas, there's no place for the present. So we'll see that in a minute. I mean, what his wife would be, if she would be the present, that would be someone you could enjoy being with right now, and for its own sake, not because it's the past tradition, not because it's your destiny. And there's no place for that, so she just drops out. And instead, why doesn't Julius drop out, the kid? Because it's the main thing that you do is you respect your grandparents and you try to find a better life for your children. I'm trying to read it again as if contemporary. I mean, it's a very American thing that you want your children to have the better education, better possibilities, and better health than you had. And that, I think, is the Romans had that kind of attitude. It's taking care of making a better life for the children. In this case, it's rather dramatic, making the ruler of the line of rulers of Rome something for which, this is the crucial thing, your parents or your grandparents sacrificed their present enjoyment to make sure that you had a better life than they had. That's what's going on in Rome already. There's nothing. You don't hear anything like that in Homer. You don't hear anything like that in Aeschylus. But it's the pious thing to do. It's so familiar to us that we don't even realize it's our own special view. That Aeneas' one of his basic features is he's ready to sacrifice his present enjoyment for the dream of a better world for his descendants. That's the whole ethics of working hard, making sacrifices, don't have comfort, don't have enjoyment, and so forth. Did I say this last time? I always think of this as Lewis Carroll's jam yesterday and jam tomorrow, but never jam today. That is, you've always got the past which you're proud of and the future which you're dedicated to, but the present plays no role in it. And now we get to Dido. Why is Dido such a big threat? What would be the greatest threat to somebody with Aeneas-like piety? What could be the worst thing that could happen to them? Well, in a certain way, it would be Julius's death, because if he doesn't have the future to dedicate himself to, what would he do? But I don't mean what would be the biggest tragedy in his life. I mean, what would be the greatest threat? What would be the greatest danger that could happen to him?
Not making it to
Yes, but for a special reason. I mean, it could be if you keep sinking the storm. That would be bad. That would be bad. But what I'm thinking of is the big threat is somebody or something that could make him say, in effect, boy, this is nice. I wish I could just stay here all the time. In other words, to appreciate the present. Something that would make him be able to, in effect, relax and enjoy the present without having his father on his back. I don't know what he did with his father. He dumped his father somewhere when he's with Dido. What happened to his father? Did he die? I think so. Anybody remember? I think he died. But anyway, but if he has to get rid of his father and stop thinking always about how to take care of his son and found Rome, and just relax and have fun with Dido. And of course, that's exactly what happens. That's exactly what she is the temptation to do that. Where do I have this? Now I have to find it. I had it. 85, page 85. Yes, here. Line 255. Dido has designed to join herself to him, and now in lust, forgetful of their kingdom, they take long pleasure, fondling through the winter, and so forth. I mean, they are enjoying the present. They are just relaxing together, lying around together. And she does that to him. She actually gets him to stop thinking about his destiny. But that's a dangerous temptation. And, of course, he's got to get out of it. And being pious, he will get out of it. But that would mean he'd have to leave Dido. And you could say, he could say, the gods made me do it. But in effect, really, it's his character. As a dutiful son and father, he's got to do it. There's no place in his kind of piety for, what does it say, lying around in long pleasure, fondling through the winter. There's no place for that. Okay. So the big enemy is what makes you forget your duty and enjoy the present. And what's interesting is that, and sort of makes, I think, this book a lot less interesting than it might have been, is that all forms of enjoyment are level. They're all just equally bad. They're squalid cravings. They're slaves of squalid slaves of squalid what? Craving. And whether it be, I don't know, good food, sexual desire, commitment to another person because you love to be with them all the time. Virgil doesn't distinguish it. He doesn't distinguish between love and lust and friendship and so forth. Anything that gets in the way of your doing your duty is bad. And anybody who attempts you to enjoy the present is dangerous. And you get this all around. And this is Stoic, by the way. The philosophy behind it is, but I don't see that you don't care, and I don't care. You're not going to read the Stoics, but I just mention it because the Stoics have this duty notion and this don't let yourself be sort of enslaved by anything that makes you, one, forget your duty, and two, dependent on them so that if you lost them, you would be upset. Where am I? Okay, and now I'm given that. How is he going to describe Dido falling in love with Aeneas? Well, if he can't make any distinctions about people's being sort of in some positive relation to other people that trumps their duty, they're all going to be squished together. That's why it's sort of the squalid lust description is so typical of him, of Virgil. But now he gets this whole carefully laid out story of a certain understanding of love. It's interesting because it is so utterly different from Dante and from us, romantic love, for instance. Love is, well, here, let's read it. The bottom of 23, line 290. But in her breast, the Scythian ponders new strategies. That's Venus. The Cupid, changed in form and feature, come instead of sweet Ascanius, and with his gifts inflame the queen to madness, insinuate a fire in her very bones. And then, so love is a kind of flame. That's the first thing. At the bottom of 24, it's more of it, 960. When she embraces you, this is the Cupid pretending to be Aeneas' son, and kisses tenderly, your breath can fill her with a hidden flame, your poison penetrate deceivingly. So now we've got love is desire, is fire, and is poison. These things are being stacked against it in all the metaphors. And now let's just go on to one more. And 3. Well, yes, in books 2 and 3, which you're not going to read, there's more. But then what goes on in books 2 and 3 is important for the love story aspect, because Aeneas tells all the adventures of the fall of Troy. And, of course, that's pretty exciting, and he's a big hero in it, and Dido falls for that completely. And so after she's heard that, she just can't get him off her mind, and she's hooked. On 81, well, maybe we should read 80. It's very important. Line 25. She had a husband already who died, Sychaeus. And Aeneas, this is the line 25, is the only man to move my feelings, to overturn my shifting heart. I know too well the signs of the old flame. Well, keep that sentence in mind. I recognize, again, the feeling of the ancient flame. And you will see where that comes up in the Divine Comedy and what a difference it makes. But for her, it's just more of this flame devouring her. And then it turns out it gets even wilder on 81, line 88. Meanwhile, the subtle flame devours her marrow within her breast. The silent wound lives on. Add one to the list. We've now got a poison, a flame, and a wound. Lives on. Unhappy Dido burns. And what's happened to her? She's been shot by Cupid's arrow. This is no little Cupid Christmas card or the birthday card or love card. Cupid's arrow turns out to be very bad for you. Give me just one. The shaft of death still clinging to her side. She's running around. That's Cupid's arrow. And then she, at the bottom of 81, and then we'll talk, insane, she seeks out the banquet to hear more about Troy and so forth. She is totally hooked. Yeah.
On page
22.
860, before Cupid comes.
Line what? Because you have a different book.
Line
82?
860.
860. But it isn't on our 23. On 22, I see where we are. Okay, go ahead.
It says, first at the sight of him, and then at all he had endured, Sidonian Dido was startled. So it almost seems like she noticed him a little before Cupid showed up, and he just, inflamed her feelings.
Yes, she already was, there was sort of infatuation at first sight. He's a handsome guy, and she's a lonely woman, and she's a princess, and she's a queen, and he's a king. It was sort of set up anyway, and then Venus came and really took it to the extreme, in order, of course, to get him out of there, because he's lying around enjoying the present, and that's not his job. So, and there she is on 81, burning, insane, and so forth, listening to him. And let's see now. So Cupid, Eros, in Greece, is not cute like a Valentine. And Cupid's arrow just adds this wound to the poison and the fire. And every kind of commitment is a dangerous addiction, because any kind of commitment would get in the way of your doing your duty. And her dangerous thing is being a woman who loves too much. That's clear on 82, where it says, I don't see it on 82, but it must be there. No. Where does it say already for her first husband? It talks about how she cared too much for Sychaeus, her first husband. Well, maybe we'll find it again and maybe we won't. But it says that she loved him too much, too. That's why I say she's a woman who loves too much. She really gets committed to people, and that's a bad idea. It's funny, I can't find it. So we might think that she's an innocent victim of Cupid and Venus and their manipulations, but that's not how Virgil sees it. He sees it, there's where it is. Now it's on page 13. He sees it that she has a character problem. That's what I mean by women who love too much. She just falls totally and defenselessly for whoever she's in love with, which sounds perhaps all right to us, but it doesn't sound all right to Virgil. On page 13, line 485, her husband was Sychaeus, wealthiest landowner in Phoenicia, for her father had given her a virgin to Sychaeus and joined them in the omens of first marriage. Unhappy Dido loved him with much passion. I mean, that's already just to be unhappy, to love your lover or husband with much passion. From Virgil, Virgil's got this very, very dim view of it. She has a tendency to lose control, to devote herself completely to her first husband. Notice how different that is from Homer's admiration of Helen, who was able to completely lose control and let herself be dragged off by the change of the world to the erotic that Aphrodite produced. Homer thinks, then remember, that Helen is wonderful for being open to being completely swept away. She's peerless among women. But Virgil thinks that Dido is sick for being open to being swept away. Pretty soon we get statements that she's sick. So I forget where though. Maybe I have. Yeah, well, she's mentally sick on 82, line 120. In the grip of such a scourge, and that no honor can withstand this madness. So that's what's happening to her. She's going crazy. She's really she's mentally disordered now. It turns out a kind of pathology, a kind of destructive illness, which we're just reading about. It's also very bad for queens or kings because that it distracts them caring about each other from doing their job. It distracts her from running Carthage on 82, line 110. Her towers rise no more. The young of Carthage no longer exercise at arms and build their harbors, and so and so and so and so forth. Even the crane lies neglected. That's the bad result of what's happening. Now I've got to see where we are. And Virgil has, I think, a sort of theory of the kind of self-destructive love that somebody like Dido has a tendency toward. It's part of her character. What's the self-destructiveness of it? Well, the idea is that what she loves most about Aeneas, remember, is his story. That she can't get enough of hearing him tell of the adventures in Troy. At the beginning of Book 4, the very beginning, too late the queen is caught between love's pain and press. She feeds the wound within her veins. She's eaten up by the secret flames. Aeneas' high name, all he's done, again and again comes like a flood. His face, his words hold fast her breath, and so forth and so forth. And she is moved, line 15, by what fates have driven him. That is, she sees that he's got this destiny, that he's pious, he's got this duty to found Rome, and that sweeps her away. She thinks that's impressive, that's marvelous. It is. Unfortunately, there's a contradiction in her love. Namely, she admires him for the fact that he's got to drop everything and do his duty and go to Rome, and he's doing it. Isn't that wonderful? And he has to drop her. So loving him is just bound to be trouble. I mean, she can't help it, but it's a story. Virgil's already got a kind of story of unequal love and what that can do to people. So on 96, at the bottom, line 720, she prays to any power that there may be who is both just and watchful, who cares for those who love without requital. So, and I think that's not a good translation. I like another translation better. Who love in unequal bondage. Or another translation, bound unequally by love. I mean, that gets it better. I mean, Virgil thinks that it's a kind of enslavement, and it's an enslavement in her case, where she's enslaved to Aeneas and he's not enslaved to her. That's what happens if you get into these kind of relationships. Then it's your own fault. You should avoid them. And why is it so bad? Well, not only does she suffer, but she doesn't do her job as queen. That's why it's really bad. She was pious Dido, doing her job founding Carthage and building the city, and because of this love of Aeneas, she stopped doing it. And that's bad. That's as bad as things can get. So here I listed 4 things that are wrong if you have total devotion to another human being, which is what this is really all about. The really evil thing, the bad thing that Dido's done is she's totally devoted to Aeneas. So you lose your identity. That is, you become just the sort of dependent, completely dependent on the other person. It gives you a terribly disordered life. That's what the fire, the poison, and the storming and raging around is about. It produces disorder in the state. That's what I just said. That's the Towers Rise No More on 82. And here's a new one. Now, those were just a review. There's one more bad thing. It produces self-deception. In order to carry on like this, she's got to fool herself into thinking that somehow she's married to Aeneas and she's got him for good. At the bottom of 84, line 225. Dido now, let's see, what is it? For the day was her first day of death and ruin, whatever day. For neither how things seemed nor how they deemed moves Dido now, and she no longer thinks of furtive love. Dido calls it marriage, and within this name she covers up her fault. Well, Virgil's being a terrible kind of Puritan already ahead of his time. He thinks that if they're having sex and they're not married, that's bad news too, and she is fooling herself in thinking that in some kind of mystical sort of, in principle at least, they're married, and they're just not. And so instead, this is the page before, when she not only fools herself into thinking they're married, then they can lie around taking long pleasure and so forth. And all of this is just, you can see, very much bad news. And no wonder she goes crazy. So her final thing is she's completely mad on page 100, line 890. But Dido, desperate beside herself with awful undertakings, eyes bloodshot and rolling, her quivering cheeks flecked with stains and pale with coming death, now bursts across the inner courtyard of her palace. She mounts in madness the high pyre and seizes the dart and sword and so forth, and she kills herself. Line 910. I shall die unavenged, but I shall die, she says, and then she does. She falls on the sword. And it's interesting, Virgil's doing a pretty good job. He's managed to turn the flames of desire that he starts with, all this being burning and flaming, into literal burning and flaming. And he manages to turn the wound, which he was starting with, into falling on the sword. All the sort of bad metaphors for this kind of dependent love come out in reality, and then she's dead. And how about Aeneas? Well, he realizes that he has to go on. There's no place. In fact, they've already had an encounter, and which is what really drove her mad. And it's we're not meant to be funny, but I think it's very funny. Their last parting words to each other. I think it's absolutely wacky. That on page 90, he finally has to say goodbye to Dido. And he says, well, let's go to the beginning of 446. Aeneas, warned by Jove, held still his eyes and struggled to tried to repress. He pressed care back within his breast. And now, what does he say to Dido? He says, if fate had granted me to guide my life by my own auspices and to unravel my troubles with unhampered will. So, what do you expect him to say after that? This is where it's funny. How would you finish that? If fate had allowed me to guide my life by the way I wanted and so forth, I, what? Would have stayed with you. And what does he say, tactful as he is? Then I would cherish first the town of Troy, the sweet remains of my own people, that's the tradition and the father on his back, and the tall rooftops of Prime, and my hand would plant again a second Pergamus, that is, a second Troy. And then skipping a little, I'd go to Italy, there is my love, there is my homeland, that's the future. So there he is saying to her in the present, oh boy, if I could only do what I wanted to do. He doesn't say, I'd stay with you. At least that would be tactful. All he says is, I'd go back to my old tradition and go back to Troy, or I'd help and I'd get Julius the new city, and we'd found Rome. Poor Dido had no place in it. Yeah, have I misread it?
But then doesn't he end
What?
the entire passage by saying it's not my own free will that leads to it? That he's doing it because the fate had
Yeah, well, it's his duty. I mean, I think. I mean, it's in Virgil. I think sort of character is what makes people do things. But he comes to the same thing. He's saying, being the pious Aeneas that I am, I have to go. Where is this, though? I want to read it the way you saw it. Oh, yeah, here, on 490. No longer set yourself in me afire. Stop your quarrel. It's not my own free will that leads me to Italy. That's right, but it's his being pious Aeneas that leads him to Italy. He's got to leave, or he will betray his very identity, and so he does. What I think is so funny is that he's so dense. I mean, he's so cruel. I mean, he could have just said, if I weren't Aeneas and pious, I would stay with you. But he doesn't. He says, if only I could do what I really wanted to do. Being Aeneas and pious, I'll leave and go back to Troy or forward to Rome. That I don't think Virgil thinks it's funny. But so much for that. Now, we got another thing to cover, which is fine. We're doing fine. So we have a moment to reflect on all this. And that mainly, this is all, I want you to see the Stoic conception of love, because I want you to see, when you get to Dante, how much that is totally going to be transformed by the troubadour, knight and lady conception of love, which is what Dante is into. Love isn't just a fact about human beings. Each culture has their own version of it. And this is a pretty unhappy one. Okay. And nobody has anything to say, we do the other thing we have to do, namely chapter 6. And why is chapter 6 important? Because in chapter 6, Aeneas goes to the underworld and talks to the people who are dead and looks at the landscape of the underworld. And that Dante is going to take over completely. I mean, you don't know till you read the Divine Comedy, and I presume none of you have. Has anybody read the Inferno? More people than I would have thought, but not all that many. Anyway, when you see that the Inferno has got all this complicated architecture, it's in 9 circles, and it's got a limbo outside, another part of it, which is called the city of Dis, which is really the Inferno proper, and so forth. All that comes from Virgil. Virgil has only one thing to go on, which doesn't help him much. Where is he getting his underworld picture from? Homer, yes. I mean, as far as I know, there may have been underworlds in between. I certainly you don't see any in Aeschylus, except it's sort of gloomy down there. But the whole underworld thing is based on Homer. And now, but we just have to look at the details and so forth. So he goes to why does he go to the underworld to begin with? Well, not to find out, why does he go in Homer? He goes because Tiresias is a prophet and he has to go to find out what's going to happen to him. But not because to fulfill his future or even to understand his future, but just to understand, I don't know why. Why does he go to the underworld? Yes, he just wants to know what's going to happen to him, right. That's a new one. Whatever thing it was, this very big insect is getting bigger. Okay. Now, anyway, he goes to see his father. Close that door. I don't know if it's going to help much. It's up there. We can't do much about it. Well, let's take advantage of the moments when they're not drilling. Okay. He's going to find his future. That's what he's going to do. And to see the Rome and what it's going to be like that he's sacrificing himself for. He wants to get a sense of the empire. He's going to learn about Augustus. And he happens to see the geography of the underworld, which is what we're interested in. And the geography of it is I'm just puzzled by why I'm laying this out the way I am. But I'll get back to what puzzled me. Now let's look at the similarities. So Virgil has 9 circles, 145. That's line 580. The 9 circles of the Inferno, so come from there. And this is something very important that I don't understand how Virgil got this. He didn't get it from Homer. It doesn't make any sense in Virgil, but it's an absolutely brilliant move in Dante. And the move is that the people in the Inferno, the punished bad people, aren't kept in a prison. They have a fortress which keeps people out. Now, that makes no sense. Nothing like that is in Homer, which would be one reason it might be here. It doesn't reflect any deep understanding of human beings and what happens to them when they die in some form or another, the way it does in Dante. But anyway, it's important to notice, and maybe somebody will tell me someday why and how Virgil got this idea that it was a fortress. But here they are. On 145, there are the 9 circles. On 148, there is the fortress, 148, line 720. It's very strange. So there is the great city called Dis. I don't know how it gets to be called Dis, but that's what it's called in Dante, too. That's the city of the dead, and it turns out that at the top of 149, like in 725, it's a fortress encircled by a triple wall. They're not being kept in. But who are they trying to keep out? And why? And it says a tower, now it's line 730-something, a tower of iron rises in the air. Dante has that too. There sits this goddess who wears a bloody mantle. She guards the entrance, sleepless day and night. And she guards it not from people running out and escaping, but she guards it from people coming in. It's so important in Dante, and it makes such sense in Dante, but I can't tell you yet, except that you just remember it. Now, another interesting feature of it, this is how it's like Dante in a way that I don't understand how it got to be like Dante. There's another place where it's very unlike Dante, and we do understand that. Virgil has no tendency to rank the bad souls. All their sins, if they're not pious and doing their duty, seem to be equal. You find this on 150, a kind of grab bag of sins, because you don't realize yet, Dante has endlessly refined categories. Not only are there 9 circles of increasing badness as you go down, but every circle has sub-circles of increasing badness. But here at the bottom of 150, line 805, and there are those who in their lives had hated their brothers, had struck their fathers, deceived a client. What a big combination, what a weird grab bag of funny things. Had brooded all alone on new-won treasure and set no share apart for kin and friends. Those slain for adultery. That's interesting. I mean, not the people who commit adultery, but the people who, well, they committed adultery, and they're there because once they committed adultery, they got killed for it. Those who followed rebellious arms and broke their pledge to masters. Anyway, just a tremendous leveling of badness, where they all seem to be equally bad. They're just all dumped into the city of Dis in a kind of random way. It even gets weirder. About 826, this one assailed the chamber of his daughter, a child molested, in the midst of all this, and compelled forbidden mating, and so forth and so forth. All, now 832, gather all the forms of crime and tell the names of all the torments. That's what he's going to do. But thank goodness he doesn't do it, or it would be pretty boring. And now there's also something else that is very similar, and that is that there's a place outside of this bad fortress where everybody's in good shape. At the bottom of 151, 845. They came upon the lands of gladness, glades of gentleness, groves of blessedness, a gracious place. The air is generous. Do you recognize what that is? from Homer? That's the fields of asphodel where Menelaus goes, where the weather is always nice and where everybody's lying around, and that's nice. What's really fun is on 152. It's sort of like another joke, but a little less ho-ho. But shall I try to talk over it? Can you hear me? Well, maybe I don't have to. Let's see what happens next. 862. I'm going to try to talk over it. Can you hear me back there when this buzzing is going on? Okay, we're just going to ignore it. What's interesting is that there's a place where they get to play at being soldiers and so forth. So on 863, from far, Aeneas wonders at their phantom armor and chariots. Their spears are planted, fixed in the ground. The horses graze. The very same delight that once was theirs in life, in arms and chariots and care to pasture their steeds, has followed them underneath. That's very interesting. Look at that. These people are perfectly happy that there's no risk. They have no power in their arms. There's no surprises. How did Achilles feel about the similar situation? He thought it was terrible. Well, what's interesting is they don't have a sense of war or as exciting because it's risk, because it gives you power, because you can be sung about afterward. It's really like the holodeck. There's a clear modern thing. I mean, it's totally unreal, and they know it's unreal, but they don't care because they aren't interested in risk and fame. They're just interested in entertainment. And they've got entertainment. And so anyway, so that's another insight into how differently Virgil thinks about anything, including fighting. You just fight to found Rome, but not to get sung about, apparently, qua fighter. I mean, Aeneas is getting sung about all right. But anyway, so there they are with that. And a little more insight into something interesting. On line 875, we get to hear what poets are for. They are pious too. And then the pious poets, they were good in life. And Dante puts all the previous artists in limbo, like that's Virgil gets that from Dante too. The pious poets whose song were worthy of Apollo, those who had made life more civilized with newfound arts. You recognize that? I mean, there's such consistency. What did they do? They tamed people, the poets. They aren't going to sort of set up a world. They aren't going to write. I mean, I don't know what Virgil thinks he's doing. He's not the normal sort of poet because he's been hired to produce this book. But normally poets sort of soothe people and so forth. And they get civilized, made life more civilized with newfound art. So poets are civilizing. That's all you get out of that. Okay, I'm going to go on because I want to make sure we get where I want to get. They've had a dream of ease. They got the entertainment. And what would Homer find missing? And why would the people in Homer not be happy with this kind of underworld? Because they don't have things whooshing up. They haven't got to cope with constant risk and surprises. And the Romans, why are they so happy there? Because they're glad everything is under control. That is, what could be better than not having any risks or surprises? But now there's another funny feature, and that is, how do they view their bodies, these Stoics? Well, we saw that in the underworld, they lack bodies in Homer, and they lack bodies in Virgil. In Homer, people like Achilles are very upset at lacking their bodies. But are the people in Virgil upset about lacking their bodies? No, they like it. They think, wow, terrific. I mean, it's like life in the holodeck all the time. No real danger and so forth. I will show you there on 156. No? Oh, on 154. I'm going to have to fix that. Try to get my pen out of my pocket. On 154, the middle of the page, we'll find out what they think of bodies. Line 950. Aeneas has met his father now and is sort of interviewing him. But Father, can it be that any souls would ever leave their dwelling here to go beneath the sky of earth and once again, that is, would anybody leave this terrific place, which is where you go when you die if you've been good, namely this is what Dante will call limbo? And the answer is no, of course they wouldn't. Would they go and take on their sluggish bodies again? Are they madmen? No, they aren't madmen. They wouldn't. So what does this tell you about life for the Romans? It's better to be dead. That's a pretty sad life. And the proof of it is on the next, I didn't make it up, on 155, why would they want to go back? Well, we are told that they wouldn't. That would be crazy. So what do they have to do? They have to brainwash them in order for them to go back on 990, roughly, on 155. So when they're past their time there, they're summoned by the god to Lethe in a great assembly that free of memory. They get literally brainwashed. Their memories get wiped, so they don't remember how bad it is to be alive and living in the world. Then they return beneath the curve of earth, that they may once again begin to wish for bodies. They forget how unpleasant it is to have this sluggish body, so they get sent back. And they would love to be away from a life of fear, of joy, of anything like disturbing like that. And I don't have any reference there. I thought I did, but I don't. But maybe I do back here. Well, here's more about the bodies. At the bottom of 154, how they feel about their bodies. Fiery energy in these seeds, that's the basic sort of thing that gets passed on when they get brainwashed. That's their soul, but with no content. In these seeds, their source is heavenly, but they are dulled by harmful bodies. This is the sort of soul, and it gets put in the body, and that's bad for it. Blunted by their own earthly limbs, their mortal members, because of these. Now, and why are they bad, the body? Because it gives them emotions. Because of these, they fear and long and sorrow and joy. Even joy is something you shouldn't get stuck on. It's sort of Buddhist. I mean, if you get stuck on joy, then something gives you joy, and nothing lasts forever. Then you get sad because you lost. You never get hooked on anything such that you enjoy it, because eventually you'll lose it, and then you'll be miserable. That's a Stoic view. It's a Buddhist view, I think. At least my son, the Buddhist, tells me so. So no joy even. They do not the kind of joy that comes from being attached to things and being embodied. You can have a different kind of joy. They do not see the light of heaven. They are dungeoned in their darkness and blind prison. That's their body. So they get brainwashed, and then they can come out. And so now, one more quick thing. We've got to see Augustus and his being a god. So the climax, all this going to hell was, on the part of Aeneas, was to see the future and, in effect, to produce what he's been paid to produce, a book which tells us that Rome will finally become great and Augustus will become great. This is on line 135. My son, this is Aeneas' father, it is beneath his auspices that where are we? We'll make her boundaries as broad as earth, and so forth and so forth. Never mind that. The bottom 1044. Now turn your two eyes here to look upon your Romans, your own people. Here is Caesar, that's Augustus, and all the line of Julius, and that will come beneath the mighty curve of heaven. This is the man you heard so often promised, Augustus Caesar, son of God, who will renew a golden age in Latvia. Well, Augustus is getting his money's worth. That's about as great as publicity as he could possibly have. And of course, Virgil can make this prediction with assurance because he's writing from a time way after Aeneas is visiting hell. And so it's only a prediction here, but it turns out to be true. And Augustus Caesar is like a god, and that means he will be venerated, and he embodies and holds up to the people the governing or ordering power that is the essence of Rome, I say. And that is, at the very end of the book now, of book 6. And his father is just on line 1185. His father, Anchises, shows his son each scene and fires his soul with love of coming glory. Love of coming glory is a bit much. I really should look at another translation. That doesn't sound quite right to me. It sounds too Homeric. But it's a sense of what he will achieve when he does his duty. I wonder if it really says that. But then comes a really weird twist, which you could only be prepared for if you really understood that Virgil was saying, on the one hand, that it would better to be dead, and on the other hand, Rome is going to flourish under this near god, Augustus. That doesn't seem too... They seem a little bit in tension. And there's this mystery at the end of the chapter. Nobody knows what to make of this. 2,000 years of consternation. There are 2 gates of sleep. The one is said to be of horn. Through it, an easy exit is given to true shades. The other is made of ivory, perfect and glittering, but through that way the spirits send false dreams into the world above. That is, there are 2 ways to get out of hell and up into the real world. One exit, you go and you... you're just 2 gates. Well, you're a true shade. Whatever true shade is, I don't know. But on the other hand, if you go out the other gate, you are a victim of false dreams. And here, which gate do you think Aeneas would go out of? A true shade or a victim of false dreams? Well, you would think. I mean, after all, this is a book that praise the future of Rome and praise Augustus, that this better not be a false dream. But here Anchises, when he's done, accompanies his son, and he sends them through the gate of ivory. You think, what? Ivory? This gate of false dreams? Well, maybe Virgil really sort of understood that this is a kind of miserable life when you're better off dead. And he's sort of commenting on his propaganda and saying, here, I just want you to notice, if you're reading carefully, that this is all propaganda. That's what some people think, and other people don't know what to think. But if you know what to think, come and tell me. But I want to get just a little bit further. I have just 3 minutes, was all I need. So Augustus is going to hold up to the people. I think I've read it already. This great ability to get order into everything. Yes, that's fine. Notice 2 things now in the book. It's sort of more monotheistic than Aeschylus, because instead of 2 big forces, the Furies and the Apollonians, and then some sort of deal between them, there's only one real God figure, and that's Augustus. And if you have, it isn't... all those other gods don't really do anything in the book, but Augustus holds up to them what it is to be a Roman, what it is to establish order. And if there's a work of art and a god, it's got to be Augustus. And then when you get that, you'll get a universal and forever empire on page 10. At the bottom, line 390. I set no limits to their fortunes. Who's talking? Jupiter. To their fortunes in no time. I give them empire without end. Remember when the Furies ask Athena if the deal that she's made with them will be forever. She says, I can't promise you more than I can deliver. Well, the Romans have really got the idea that they've done it. They have produced an empire so stable that it will just last forever. And empire without end, that's so much. Now, but is that an illusion or not? That's the puzzle that we already talked about. And I say, think about page 156 to myself. What am I thinking about? Here we go. Let's see. Well, at 1033. My son is beneath his auspices. That's Augustus again. The famous Rome will make her boundaries as broad as the earth itself. They will control the whole world. And make her spirit the equal to Olympus. They will become godlike. Now and then back to Augustus, and I'll stop with that. Now turn at the bottom of the page, 1044. Now turn your eyes to look upon your Romans, your own people. They're saying, Aeneas' father is saying that to him. Here is Caesar and all the line of Julius that will come beneath the mighty curve of earth. This is the man you heard so often promised, Augustus Caesar, son of a god, and so forth. We're back to that. Okay, now, next time we go to Christianity. I want to say just this, that the Christians considered Virgil as sort of proto-Christian, that he was almost Christian, and what he lacked, obviously, was a kind of life in which you could be joyful. But then he was sad about it. We'll get that next time.